The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So if you've come here looking for more freak out on Shedeur Sanders sliding to the fifth round or preview of Caps Game 5 tomorrow night, you've come to the wrong place. What we're going to do today is we're going to react for most of the 2 hours to what happened yesterday at the National Press Club. One of the great days in D.C. sports history. Could it fall apart? Yeah, it could. Is there pushback from the city council on this? Yes, there is. Is there pushback from residents of D.C. who don't want this to happen? Of course. It's a song and dance that we will have to go through for the next few months, but I firmly believe that the 2030 season will open at a brand new stadium on the RFK site, and I could not be happier.
We're at RFK Stadium, which is sold out for the 130th consecutive time. The Eastern Division of the NFC, Washington with the best record in pro football, 13-2. The Giants, their opponents, 3-11-1, a most disappointing year. Ideal weather conditions, however, temperature 43 degrees, northwest wind 9 miles an hour. Forecast is sunny and cool. It couldn't be better. What a majestic, beautiful sight. Our nation's capital with the Washington Monument in the background. And this great city has been worked to a football fever and frenzy by this Redskin team. They do love them here.
If you're too young to remember, ask your dad, ask your grandfather, ask somebody who lived through the glory days. That was incredible. And when you heard Pat Summerall say, and the majestic view of the monuments, a mock-up I saw of the stadium has a view of the nation's capital in the end zone. It is going to be a dome stadium, and we'll get into the reasons for that, some of which are obvious, but it is going to have a cover over the field, but it is going to be a glass cover. And I don't know what that's going to mean for sunlight coming in as what happens in Dallas. They'll deal with that at the appropriate time. But to think that you can look in the end zone and you can see the nation's capital, that's a really big deal. And for those of us who remember the Monday Night Football blimp shots of the monuments all lit up and the stadium lit up, that was incredible. That was something that was not only a big deal here, but it was a big deal across the country because this is the nation's capital, and it is no accident that Roger Goodell found time in his schedule to attend this news conference yesterday. The big push from the NFL is we want to see this franchise back in D.C. And it's not just because Roger Goodell's father was in Congress and he went to games at RFK when he was a kid. Now, this is big for the NFL, and the NFL is a behemoth of a business that's getting bigger, a $25 billion a year business. And they have great influence in Congress. They have great influence in business. And this, I believe, will happen, but we have to go through a lot of the mishigas, which we will get to. Now, the news conference yesterday was kind of a combination of an announcement and a pep rally because, you have to convince the city council, and the votes aren't there right now. The chairman, Phil Mendelson, is against this, but if you listen to the Mendelson comments yesterday about this, he said if we took the vote now, careful to say the word now, because I think he believes that there will be negotiations, there will be deal-making, whatever it takes, and the deal will eventually get done. But right now he's standing up in opposition for this. He thinks the city spending $1 billion can be better spent in other places. You have to remember this, that the Nationals came here in 2005. They weren't coming without a stadium deal. They knew that they were going to be able to play the Expos. They knew they were going to be able to play at RFK for 3 years. And as a matter of fact, if that wasn't still standing, if that had been torn down shortly after the Redskins left in 96, I don't know what would have happened for baseball here. That was a key element of that they had a place that was not great, but at least inhabitable for 3 years. The other part of it was there was no ownership of baseball at that point. It was owned by Major League Baseball. It wasn't sold to the learners until about a year and a half after they got here. So there was no owner to kick in basically 3/4 of what the Harris Group is going to pay, $2.7 billion. The city will pay $1 billion, and the team will pay for cost overruns, which I think is important too. There's always overruns. So the city had to come up with the money to build the stadium, and it was $610 million. I believe that was negotiated down a little bit, but Linda Kropp, dead set against this on the city council, and she tried an 11th hour move that could have conceivably killed the deal. I remember talking to Mark Toohey, who was the head of the D.C. Sports Commission at the time, and he said, yeah, we think it'll get done, but there's some bumps in the road here along the way. In this case, you got the biggest investment ever by private enterprise in the city of Washington, D.C. Is that going to be enough to sway those on the city council who don't want it to happen? We'll have to see. But as I say, this was as much a pep rally as it was a news conference opened this way by Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Promise made. So I want to start by saying, welcome home. Let's give our commanders a big Washington, D.C. welcome. We are so happy to talk this morning about bringing our team home to the sports capital, back to RFK, where they belong. And I couldn't be more excited for our city, our team, and our fans. Josh and the entire team at the Commanders, thank you. We want to say thank you for not just buying our team, some would say saving our team, getting the team to the NFC Championship for the first time in 33 years. But we want to thank you for making a transformational investment in Ward 7, in our city, especially now, a time where we need it the most. Commissioner, I know you can't have favorites, but we know where you grew up. And this is a big deal. I've been working on this for the 10 years that I've been mayor. And now we have the right partner at the right time. And Josh is someone who cares more than just about this franchise. He cares about doing the right thing. And he likes to win. You've heard me say that before. He knows how to put together a winning team. And throughout this process, it's been a cooperative one. We were joined in our goals to advance a deal that we could be proud of, a development that would serve the city for generations to come, and support the best professional sports franchise in the world.
Wow. Now there's an ex-owner who's probably chafing at that, and there's a current owner who maybe is chafing at that, although Muriel Bowser made a deal with Ted Leonsis to keep the teams in D.C. He really never had a chance to get it to Virginia with that stupid grandstanding thing that he did with Glenn Youngkin, but she's got a deal. The teams are going to stay, and Ted might say, well, I got a team here with the all-time leading goal scorer, and we may win the Stanley Cup again. So how about me? There's that. Also, she said that Josh Harris may have saved the team, boy, oh boy, and then said, right owner, right time. Like, this could not have happened with Dan Snyder. If things hadn't gone the way that they did, and boy, it was an ugly ending, but what a blessing it was. But Snyder wouldn't have been able to come up with the money in the first place. And second place, nobody wanted to deal with him. He was not trustable in all of his dealings. So right owner, right time, and it's about legacy for Bowser. She says she's been working on it for 10 years. I don't know how many more years she's going to remain mayor, probably not too many more. 10 years is a long time. And, she will be the sports mayor, the one that saved the Caps and the Wizards for D.C. and also maybe brought back the most important team in town back to D.C. after 30 years. That will be part of her legacy. It will also be part of Josh Harris's legacy. He doesn't want to just be known as a man who made a lot of money. In his hometown, he's bringing back an important piece of the city. And we'll get to more of his comments coming up. This was more from Bowser talking about, and again, this is part of what went on yesterday, a lot of selling, how this will be a win-win.
This land has been blighted and underutilized for too long. And what our deal with the Washington Commanders provides is the fastest and surest route to developing the RFK campus, and not just delivering sports and entertainment, but delivering housing, jobs, recreation, and economic development. We will be able to deliver thousands of homes here. It will deliver a world-class, community-focused sportsplex for our kids. It will create park space and build out riverfront and trails. It's about creating jobs for D.C. residents and revenue that will support what all of our city needs, city services that have made us a growing city. We're going to be talking a lot about this project in the coming weeks and months, and it will be clear that this is a good deal for D.C. It's a fantastic deal, a win-win-win for the city, the team, and the fans.
So that was the pitch from Bowser. Then came time for Josh Harris to talk, and although he doesn't have the rah-rahness of the mayor, and frankly, I'm kind of surprised for someone who is as successful as he is. I mean, it's different for everybody, but he is not a great public speaker. But I feel there's an honesty to him. I think there's a genuineness to him that he does, in fact, want to do this for the city. And we'll play something a little bit later, where he talks about his passion and his memories of going to games when he was a kid. This is how he began his portion of the news conference yesterday.
What a great day. It's a great day in our process to bring the Commanders home. And Mayor, thank you. I'm so appreciative for our partnership and everything you've done through this process. And, you know, this day is a testament to your leadership and the city's leadership. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the council members that are here. We know you're going to be considering all this, and thank you for your partnership in helping us get to this historic moment. We know you have a bunch of work to do, and we're going to be there transparently providing all the information to you, Chairman Mendelson. I know you're not here with us today, and the entire group of D.C. council members, so very much appreciative that you're here today to listen. And Roger, I know you're busy. Thank you for being here. It's very meaningful to have the commissioner of the NFL sitting side by side with us today. So today I am absolutely thrilled to announce that the Commanders are ready to make the single, and our partners are committed to make the single largest private investment in D.C. history. You know, one of my earliest memories was walking down East Capitol Street to RFK. I only knew one person, my Uncle Jerry, Robbie Miller sitting right there, who had tickets because there was a 25-year waiting list. And I got to go once or twice a year, but I watched every game intently. And I grew up watching the greats, whether it be Sonny Jurgensen, Billy Kilmer, Joe Theismann, Mark Ripien, the Hogs, Joe Gibbs, Art Monk, and 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, he got Darrell Green there. He got John Riggins there. He got Joe Gibbs to show up there. And his memories are somewhat similar to mine. I didn't have an uncle that had tickets, but I knew a couple of people whose dad or grandfather had tickets, and sometimes a ticket would filter down to me, and I would go with them. And My dad worked for what is now Clark Construction, was called George Hyman Construction. And in those days, there were no luxury boxes. Nowadays, a company that size would have an enormous luxury box, and they would entertain friends and clients and things like that. But in those days, you only had the owner's box, so to speak, which is a mezzanine box, open air at RFK. Jack Kent Cooke famously had famous people in there, senators, congressmen, people from the media, so forth. But even wealthy businesses had tickets in the stands. And by the end of the year, the team wasn't very good, and the weather was bad, and the tickets would filter down to my father, who was not an executive. He was a project manager with Hyman at that time, and that's how we would get to go. Or you'd buy tickets from a scalper. Scalper is a term that has gone away, too, thanks to SeatGeek and StubHub and places like that, but there would be people standing outside the stadium with tickets, and they would sell them over face value. And the 25-year waiting list, that's not an exaggeration. It was an exaggeration under the ownership of Dan Snyder. In fact, it was an outright lie. But back in the day, when you had 55,000 seats, and most of them, if not all of them, were filled with season ticket holders, you couldn't get a hold of season tickets. They were contested in divorces and wills big time. And so his experience was very similar to mine, that somehow or another a ticket or two would wind up in his hand. Also, you have to look at what has happened here. I think you throw out the first year of the ownership because they didn't get control of the team until like a week before training camp. And they spent the first year just kind of, assessing things, assessing the damage. But you really have to look at it from the beginning of January 2024 to today. So less than a year and a half. Hiring Adam Peters as a general manager. Hiring Dan Quinn as a coach. Okay, they got a big assist from how bad the team was the year before, and they were able to draft Jaden Daniels. But you also, sometimes you can draft a great quarterback, and if you don't have the structure around him, it doesn't work out. As terrific a player as he is, and as dedicated to his craft as he is, coming in at 5 o'clock in the morning, if it's a bad organization, it doesn't work out like it did last year. He put $75 million into this stadium, knowing that they want to get out as soon as they can. He had sellouts for every game, and as the season went on, more and more of the fans were actually rooting for the burgundy and gold. I was at the Chicago game, the Hail Mary game. Looked like mostly burgundy and gold there. They make it to the NFC Championship game for the first time in 33 years. And now the coup de grace, the topping, they got the stadium deal in place. And I would say for a businessman who was, I think, probably exceeded his goals. When he went to Harvard Business School, I know he thought about being successful, but maybe not this successful. And I think when you talk about goals, I think the goals were there, but did he think they would happen in this period of time? Probably not.
When our ownership group started on this journey 2 years ago, we laid out 3 clear priorities: build a championship caliber team, improve fan experience, and make a positive impact on this community. Today's announcement is a key part of that vision. Let's come home. This project is about so much more than building a stadium. It's about a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a catalyst for long-term transformational economic growth here in D.C. That means thousands of new jobs, billions of new tax revenue, thousands of new homes, partnerships with local businesses, and the creation of about 90 acres of mixed-use development for our community. And you know what? The city of Washington and the DMV deserve it.
So, again, a lot of cheering. I don't know who all the people were in the room. There were reporters. I assume they weren't cheering. But this was the goal. It was to announce and sell. And I think they did a pretty good job. Also, Bram Weinstein, emceeing the event, did a really nice job with that. Coming up, we'll get to some of the Q&A for Muriel Bowser, Roger Goodell, and Josh Harris, what they said in that. And And also, the other side of it, that it's not a done deal yet. We'll talk about that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
There is only one thing that can top my enthusiasm for the return of the football team to D.C., and that is the enthusiasm that I have for Celebrity Deli. Showing up today, yes, indeed. Celebrity Deli, right off of Route 50. It is a great, great delicatessen. How do I know that? I know delis, okay? I do. And this will be the real acid test for them. At Passover, my granddaughter declared my sister's matzo ball soup the best matzo ball soup ever. So we're going to do a taste test with Celebrity Deli in the next week or so, and I will give you the Eliza feedback on the Celebrity Deli matzo ball soup. But if it's like any of their other food, it's going to be a grand slam. You like Reubens? They got Reubens. You like pastrami? They got pastrami. You like latkes? These latkes have to be the best deli latkes in the area. Now, my sisters, who come right out of the fryer, okay, but if you eat at the restaurant when they come right out of the fryer, they are top-notch. You want to have a party, a celebration, you want to have it catered by Celebrity Deli. And the way you reach them is celebritydeli.com. That's deli with a Y, D-E-L-L-Y, celebritydeli.com. It's in Falls Church. They've been there for over 50 years. Delis don't last for 50 years unless they do the authentic stuff, and they do. So that's Celebrity Deli. Drop by right off of Route 50 or order online at celebritydeli.com. That's celebritydeli.com. Okay, back to the joy and enthusiasm for the new stadium. We did some of the intro remarks from Josh Harris and Mayor Muriel Bowser yesterday in the joint announcement. I did want to throw this in because I think Tom Lavero makes a very good point here that hasn't been talked about a lot. Let's say that this deal is coming through a year ago. I know, you'll have new ownership, and you'll have a year ago you would have had a new general manager in Adam Peters and a new coach in Dan Quinn, and the draft would have just taken place, and there would be enthusiasm for Jaden Daniels for sure, but nobody could have predicted he'd be this good, and nobody would have predicted this team would go to the NFC Championship game. So is it possible that a big boost for this deal is the fact that the team played so well this past season? And as Lavero writes, let's face it, the DMV felt like an inmate seeing sunlight for the first time in 25 years of solitary. It's hard not to be the good guy, even if raising ticket prices when the bad guy was so bad. Talking about Dan Snyder, that's a big thing for them too. But you also have to look at the Jaden Daniels part of this, and he writes, nobody wants to be in the Jaden Daniels business, and any opposition will feel like Dean Wormer shutting down Delta House, right? So, it's like the city council, those that are right now in favor of it, and those that possibly could be swayed on this, but the general reaction, I think, from the ticket-buying public is, yah! Woo-wee! And, if this deal gets done, and I think it will, and you think about this, that if they move in 2030, Jaden Daniels will be entering his 7th season. He will be 28, 29 years old, something like that, in the absolute prime of his career. You hope he stays healthy, but by and large, he did last year, made all 17 starts. I mean, that's the perfect storm there, right? A really good contending team moving into a brand new stadium with one of the best quarterbacks, if not by then the best quarterback in the league. Wow. So we may look back years from now and go, the new stadium, whatever it's going to be called, whether the naming rights convey, Northwest Stadium, New Northwest Stadium, some other sponsor, we may look down the road and say, that's the house that Jaden Daniels built, kind of like, Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth came to the Yankees in 1923, and I don't think the stadium opened until like 26 or something. I have to look that up, but it's 26 or 27 is when they moved into Yankee Stadium. They played at the Polo Grounds before that, and because of the popularity of Babe Ruth, they were able to build that stadium. I'm saying that this is all Jaden Daniels because it's been in the works before he got here, but That's a good point, that the good feelings that we all have for this are somewhat related to the fact that instead of coming off a 4-win season, they're coming off going to the NFC Championship game. This is a question to Bowser, Muriel Bowser, and Josh Harris about when this really all came together.
It really started to get real in the last few weeks when when the mayor, I think, shook me by and said we got to get going, even though we're waiting around for some politics to occur. And but it got real then, and we're so happy to be in partnership with the city and the NFL announcing it today.
For me, Sam, I knew once we got the land that we needed to be ready. And when I sat across the table from Josh, and we kind of had a time frame in mind that this had to get done, or we were both going to have to move on. He was going to have to move on from us, and we were going to have to move on from the team. And so once we established that, I already knew we had the best site. I did. I knew we had the best site. And once I knew that he wanted to be back home, that we chartered a path to get there. So I would say when we knew we had the land, we'd already been working on a pretty good plan, and now we're here.
That point she makes about both sides needing to move on, that just emphasizes the importance of that post-midnight vote in the Senate, December 21st, when by unanimous approval, they were able to turn the land for RFK over to the city. It's federal land, so city now has control of that. If that gets tabled for another year, maybe they move forward on building on the site where they are, which nobody wants to see. Yeah, they build it closer to the Morgan Boulevard Metro stop, but that's still, I'm told, even in the plans that they looked at, it was still going to be a 15-minute walk. The great thing about RFK is, man, you get out of the Metro and you look to your right, and there's the stadium. It's right there. It's a city stadium. It's downtown, and it's easy to get to by public transportation. Yeah, parking is going to be different there. There are 22,000 parking spaces now at Northwest Stadium. There are going to be 8,000 for this new stadium, and many of them are going to be underground, which, getting out of a game that goes down to the wire is going to take you a while to get out. Public transportation is probably going to be the best way to go. And Bowser says they're all set for that.
The good thing about this site is it was an NFL stadium there. The Washington football team played there for decades, and the transportation infrastructure exists. It is served by Metro. It's served by the highway. It's served by an expansive bus system. The difference between when the team last played and now is that there are many other modes that are available for people to travel there as well. What we've heard from the community is they're tired of the blight, and they want the 180 acre parcel to be brought back to life. So one advantage is that we won't just have what's there now, a sea of parking and a stadium. We're going to be able to have a wonderful mix of uses. I love that we can show a map that demonstrates all of the different parcels that will be engaged, that include entertainment, an entertainment district that has set aside park space, including the area that can't be developed right along the Anacostia River, and an entire recreation district that the district will populate with the existing fields in our sportsplex, and what we're calling the Kingman Park District, which will be largely residential. So this is what we promise to deliver, a mix of uses that includes an NFL stadium.
Okay, so a couple things here that you have to recognize that's going to be different than the RFK experience. You got to remember this. As great as the memories are of RFK and how easy it was to get to, and tailgating in the parking lots around the stadium, which are not going to be there like they were before, it's underground parking. Remember, that was a neighborhood, and it is a neighborhood now. And so what's going to happen here is you're going to have bars and restaurants, and so instead of necessarily tailgating by your car, which is the definition of tailgating. You can go to a bar or a restaurant and sit around and have brunch or have, a few drinks or whatever you're going to do before the game. It's that kind of experience. It's like a bigger Capital One Arena is really what it's going to be. And that's a big change. Is it a change that people will be quick to welcome after, the great memories of RFK? Maybe not. But as time goes on, it'll be more and more embraced. And I can tell you this. I have been to two similar ones. Indianapolis, downtown Indianapolis is where the Colts play. That's a brand new stadium. It's got a retractable roof, which this one probably won't have because the cost would make it too high. It'll just be a dome stadium. But there are some restaurants and bars, obviously, around that, being downtown. But I think the bigger comp is Atlanta, which I was not last season, but the season before last. And, yes, everything is right down there. It's right near the basketball arena, all the office buildings and everything else downtown. And that's probably what this is going to resemble more so than what we've had with RFK. And this is Roger Goodell on the kind of thing that we can expect if, in fact, this stadium gets built.
I think Atlanta is a very interesting analogy also. I think Los Angeles clearly is. I think Detroit is. I think there are many cities where they have seen the value of the reinvestment into that community. A stadium being surrounded by a development such as this that I think is very powerful, and they've all been successful, both in, I think, the community's mind, most importantly, but also in our mind. But I also think they've been successful from an economic standpoint.
And let's remember this about the fact that it's a dome stadium. That totally changes the usage pattern for it. If it's an open-air stadium, what are you talking about? 10 football games a year with the Commanders. Maybe they'll play a couple of college games there. Maybe in the summertime there's some outdoor concerts, but you're limited. You're very much limited in an outdoor stadium. Dome stadium, it's a whole new ballgame. You can play Final Fours there. You can have heavyweight fights there, big concerts. Doesn't matter about the weather. That's going to be a major deal. That's a major thing, and the economics of that will change dramatically. That, yes, it's going to cost the city $1 billion. Okay. It cost the city over $500 million 20 years ago when they built Nats Park, and the projections for making it back were something like 25 years. They made it back in like six years. So that's very important there, and the downtown aspect of that, which he talks about, is big. This is Harris on the emotional part of this, and I don't think you can discount this. You might say to yourself, "Oh, the guy's worth billions of dollars. He owns teams, and the billionaires don't invest in things not to make money. They'll make money on this." But Harris, who's, again, I don't think is a great public speaker, but I think right here he really articulates well what their stated goals are and what this means to the ownership group, all of whom are from here. Mark Ein, who put Harris together with Mitch Rales. Mitch Rales, who grew up in Bethesda. Harris and Ein were friends growing up together in Chevy Chase. They understand the emotional draw of this and the feel that this can mean for the city if you have a team back here.
We all experienced, the rumbling of RFK and the centrality of that location in terms of its proximity to the seat of government and to businesses and being in the middle, as well as, the experience of a city stadium, right? Like walking there, taking the metro, kind of the experience itself. So I think that all of those things contributed, but at the end of the day, it was the right thing. It was less nostalgia. It was more just the fact that we had grown up here gave us that vision to, not look at the crumbling concrete that was there, but remember in our minds the vivid nature of what Washington football was all about and how it really brought a city that was socioeconomically, distinct and challenged at that point, with lots of groups of people together, right? No matter where you were from, who you were, your race, color, religion. On Sundays, you were a Washington football fan. And so that really did contribute to our focus on it, and then, you know, kind of brought it to life. And then, look, let's face it, Washington is amongst, if not the most important city in the world. It's a gateway city for the United States of America. And, you know, to have a stadium and a site, you know, where you can see the Washington Monument, you can see the Capitol. I remember watching on TV those shots and having John Madden talk about, we're here in the nation's capital, and there's the Washington Monument, there's the White House, there's the nation's capital, and then there's RFK at that bowl, right? And so all that stuff was incredibly motivating to all of us.
Yes, I think he captures it very well there. You have to remember this, too. The Senators left town in 1971, and they left 3 years after the riots. And the riots, I think, played a factor in that. People were afraid to go downtown. There was no metro, no public transportation. People didn't want to go downtown at night. They left, and right after they left, the Redskins became really good. That was George Allen, and the future is now. And when Harris talks about the uniting of the city, he's a little young to remember the George Allen days. He's thinking more about the glory days with Joe Gibbs when they went to 4 Super Bowls in 9 years, and how you could walk down the street and everybody was wearing Redskin gear and talking about the team. And they even found that the crime decreased dramatically when the Redskins were playing. I mean, that's how big it was. So he's got an understanding of that, and that's important. That's important not just for economics and for sports in this town and identity. It's important in uniting the city, and a team can do that. And we're starting to see it happen again after, you know, a disgusting 24-year period under Dan Snyder. And that is something that has to be motivating for the city council, I would hope, in improving this whenever it gets to a vote on that. Last thing I'm going to play here is from Roger Goodell. And Roger Goodell's presence there is important because it illustrates how much the league wants this to happen. You know, a lot of cases, they look at various cities and they go, yeah, you know, as long as it's reasonable, it's a good stadium, good look, all that, fine. But it's important for the league to have this team not in Landover, but in D.C.
We look at this as a very important football market. This has been one that we want to have, obviously, a sterling franchise in this community. We feel that we have that now. It's going in the right direction. I think the commitment by Josh and the city to bring the team back into D.C. is a really important one. I think emotionally, but also I think it signifies that they care about this community, they care deeply about it, and they're going to do the right things to make this franchise successful.
Okay, so that does it for the rah-rah portion of the hour. I want to get to the question that Mark Seagraves of Channel 4 asked, and that's the what-if question. The what-if. I think most football fans would like this to happen. There are people in the district, the NIMBY people, not in my backyard people who don't want this to happen. There's going to be opposition there. There's zoning issues that they have to get through. Congress has to approve it. It has to go through the city council. There are a lot of things. And this is kind of the reality check as they got towards the end of the news conference from Mark Seagraves, who covers the city council and covers D.C. for Channel 4. And he asked this very important question.
Mayor Bowser, I'm just wondering what you will say to residents at a time, you know, you're faced with an enormous uphill budget battle going forward, both in the 2025 and in the upcoming 2026, with the prospects of layoffs, cuts of services, and hundreds of millions of dollars cut from the out years in the budget. How do you justify, what do you say to residents who think this is not the right time to put hundreds of millions of dollars into this development when you're having to cut services and possibly furlough workers? And then, Mr. Harris, for you, you mentioned that through this you've learned a lot about the political process with the federal government. You're about to learn a lot about the political process with the D.C. Council. And I only see 4 council members here today. You're going to need 7 votes. I'm wondering what your plan, we saw what happened with Monumental in Virginia. I'm wondering what your plan B is and how serious you've negotiated with Maryland throughout this if this deal falls through, if the D.C. Council fails to approve this. So,
Sorry.
Mayor Bowser,
yeah.
just
well,
on...
First, Mark, I want to make sure you're not confusing viewers. We're not talking about the CR-caused FY25 summer crises. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is our future. We're talking about our FY26 budget. And I'm advancing a balanced FY26 budget that is both focused on right-sizing spending, for sure, but it is also making some big, bold investments in growth. Yeah. Now is not the time where our economy is shifting. You know what our job is right now? Our job is to replace economic activity for 40,000 people. If we don't make some change, they may not have their jobs. If we don't make some change, they may not live here. So our job is to advance a budget that is bold and that invests in growth. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about all of that growth agenda. But it starts with a catalytic investment at RFK. We cannot leave. If you need to add revenue, as we do, you can't leave 180 acres vacant. If you need to add jobs, as we do, you cannot wait for an anchor to show up to start developing there. When you need to attract business, you have to be about business. So we're going to be talking about FY26. Now, the Congress still has to fix FY25. Because if they don't, because your question is a serious one, I call it a fake budget crisis, because we have the money. That's right. So if we have to cut services because they don't fix their snafu, then that's a problem. But, you know, we're going to keep pushing it. But we can't stop, because no matter what happens with FY25, FY26 is coming. And so we're going to have, at the end of FY30, or the beginning of FY30, a new stadium. We're going to have it.
I think that this is an incredible ROI for the city of D.C., the local community around the stadium. Literally, the mayor has done an amazing job at negotiating on behalf of the city, but also becoming a partner with us in an investment that is going to create like billions of tax revenue, thousands of jobs, a whole new community, and tie together the city. And look, I look forward to continuing my engagement and intensifying my engagement with the council, both Ward 7, but also the broader DC communities and the people that are representing the broader DC community, and being super transparent, giving them the details they need. And I think the project speaks for itself. And I think the project will stand, and I believe will convince the council this is in the best interest of D.C.
So you notice there, very slickly, Harris did not answer the Mark Seagraves question about Plan B, because he doesn't even want to go there. And Plan B, man, if it comes to that, that will be such a letdown. If this falls through and the Commanders announce that they are breaking ground next to Northwest Stadium, maybe a little closer to the Metro, but not a hell of a lot closer. And you're still going to have the issues with getting in and out of the stadium off the Beltway. No, I say that's a big no. So I don't think he even wants to entertain the idea of going there. It's got to be an option. Of course it does. You got to have a fallback there. But he's committed. Sounds like there are enough people committed to this. There'll be some arm twisting, and eventually this will get done. All right, coming up, we'll get back to more on the stadium. Some really cool reaction. Scott Van Pelt did a commentary last night, and Joe Theismann talked about it on Channel 5. And before we scoot out at 11, you got to hear what Pat Collins said, not written, but could have been written. Just a beautiful tribute to how important it is to have the stadium back, not in Landover, but in Washington, D.C. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So unlike that embarrassing news conference that Ted Leonsis had about a year and a half ago when he had planned to move his teams to Potomac Yard, and he tried to convince us that the metropolitan area, the DMV, as they call it now, extends from Florida to New Jersey. No, it doesn't. And even though National Airport is technically in Virginia, it's still Virginia. And Potomac Yard is not a place that anybody wanted those teams to be, other than Ted Leonsis, who was getting a sweet deal, and the governor, Glenn Youngkin, who didn't have the votes. So that fizzled out. And I remember we carried that news conference live, and I remember commenting at the time, this is awful. This is a terrible thing. There was gloom and doom, and Tony Kornheiser called Ted Leonsis villainous for taking the Capitals and the Wizards out of D.C. Well, that quickly fell apart, and Mayor Muriel Bowser made a deal, and the teams are staying. They're doing $500 million worth of improvements to the arena. It's going to start this summer. They're taking over some area around the arena that they wanted to have. So that all worked out, and there was just... yeah, it was just a relief, really, I think, for most people when it fell through. This is a totally different case with this stadium. This is absolutely different public-wise. And I think people in Maryland, are saying, yeah, get them back to the district. And I think even Governor Wes Moore understands this. City leaders in Maryland, state leaders in Maryland, they understand what this is all about. Their constituents want this team to be downtown. That's a very important part of this. They want this to be on the RFK site. So it's a totally different deal. But there's still hurdles that have to be cleared. And the city, while it's agreeing to pay $1 billion, which is only about a quarter of the cost, and it could be even much more, is there will undoubtedly be cost overruns. The team is going to pay $2.7 billion and more. There is the city council where the votes are not there. Phil Mendelson, the city council chairman, is against it, as have others on the council who have spoken out against it. But for those who've been around here a long time, and Scott Van Pelt is one of them. He loves this area so much that he made arrangements to leave Bristol, Connecticut, where he'd worked for so many years, and started to raise his family, and was able to use the studios down here to do his show. They accommodated him, and he's now back in D.C. You see him at Maryland games all the time. And as a kid growing up, he found ways to get to RFK Stadium like the rest of us. I don't think his family had season tickets. And as I say, I think SVP is one of the best writers for television that we have. He's along the lines of, people think about great writers. Not all great writers write for television. That is a skill that's totally different than writing for newspapers or magazines or books or anything like that. You have to write in your own voice, and Scott does that as well as anybody. And this was his one big thing last night about the announcement that the team is planning to make a move back to D.C.
On Monday, the Washington Commanders and the city of Washington, D.C. announced plans to build a new stadium, which would bring the Commanders back to D.C. for the 2030 season. On the face of it, it's a significant story, as it is anytime any NFL team announces plans such as these. The Tennessee Titans are building a new stadium. The website about it tells you it is nestled on the east bank of the Cumberland River. They're on track to be playing there in 2027. Cleveland Browns, meanwhile, hoping to be in a new stadium by 29. Those plans yet to be formalized, but there's some kick-ass artist renderings of what it might look like. Here's what's different about Monday's news from any other of this kind which has come down the pike. We don't have to wonder what it's going to look like. We already know. And this is where you would be correct to accuse me of being too close to be objective. That's true. We're all from somewhere, and I'm from here. As a Washingtonian and a fan of this team, I know and we know how important this news is. Building on the same site as RFK Stadium takes us all back to a place and time that's admittedly long gone and yet won't ever be forgotten by those who lived it back then. who know that RFK did the greatest thing that sports can do. It connected us and made us feel. It made opposing teams feel something too. Dread. It was small, only 56,692, but you felt every single one of them. The mosaic that is Washington, D.C., represented in the faces of the black and white, the wealthy and poor, every faith as well, who all knew that on Sundays in this town, this was the church and the religion was the Skins. Those iconic overhead shots on CBS with Madden and Summerall in the booth to call some massive game which showed Southwest D.C. and the footprint of the location of the stadium in relation to the most meaningful places in the nation's capital, the mall, the Capitol, the Washington Monument, and RFK, a monument too, as important as any landmark in this city. To go back to that place on the strength of a largely privately funded deal is the latest and most important win for the franchise and the new owner, Josh Harris, his new GM, Adam Peters, and the new quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and now they go back to an old place which holds cherished memories in Washington history, and it has folks overjoyed. It allows those lost decades in a soulless place devoid of any meaningful history to be sunken like some old battleship as a long-lost relic is reborn. And for the younger folks who hear old-timers like me wax nostalgic, it may all sound like a fish story. But listen carefully, and you will hear it shared in the exact same way over and over again, enough to know that it's not made up. The feeling was real. It's how it was, and maybe how it will be again.
I am an older timer than Scott. I'm older, so I remember the George Allen years as well as the Joe Gibbs years. I think Scott is referring mainly to those times in the 80s, and they were more raucous, but I think one of the greatest sporting events that has ever taken place in this city took place New Year's Eve of 1972 when the Redskins beat the Dallas Cowboys, and Billy Kilmer, who never threw a great spiral, threw one of the greatest passes, if not the greatest passes he ever threw, a perfect spiral to Charlie Taylor, who cemented the game, and they won 26-3. And in those days, security was a little bit different. And fans, they don't do this in pro games. They do it in college. But fans stormed the field. I mean, the field was a sea of fans, and there's a famous Dick Darcy photo of a fan stealing George Allen's hat. You know, the Redskin hat that he wore. And this was the day where you couldn't buy those at Dick's or Fanatics or anything like that. Those were just for so if you had a Redskin hat, you had a one of one, especially George Allen's hat. I don't know where that hat ever wound up. But that was an unbelievable night. And then we had a couple of years under Jack Pardee where things didn't go as well. But then, you know, the Super Bowl year of 1982, things went in the direction of incredible greatness for like the next 9 years. And it all came to an end, of course, in 1991, last time they won the Super Bowl. But I think that what Scott is saying about all of us who experienced that tell the same stories. And it always includes the line, the stadium shook, the seats bounced up and down. And as I've explained, that's a feature that's probably not going to be a part of this stadium. Dan Snyder, probably one of the 5 or 6 interviews that he did in his last 10 years of ownership, did one with Chick Hernandez, who was then at Channel 5, I believe, or maybe he was at Comcast, I forget. But he said...
It's almost like...
He said that he wanted to build a new stadium and that he wanted it to have those seats that bounced up and down. I don't know if that'll be included in this. It'd be interesting. I don't think structurally that can happen. But the reason they bounced up and down was that D.C. Stadium opened in 1961 as a stadium that was multi-purpose. That's how they built them then. You used them for football, you used them for baseball. They don't do that anymore, but the temporary seats came out for baseball season. Well, Senators left in 1971, and the seats never came out again, even when they would have like these old-timers games. They would just, hey, if you hit a 250-foot home run, so be it. So they stayed and they rusted in. You couldn't even remove them then. And then, the next team to play there was the Nationals, and you kept them in anyway. But that's the seats bouncing up and down, and everybody tells that story. And that is what Joe Theismann talked about here. He was on Channel 5 last night. And I think when you think of RFK Stadium, there's probably 5 or 6 players that you think of. I think you immediately, at least if you're my age, you think of Sonny Jurgensen, who kind of made the place special. He came in 1964 when the team wasn't good, but they scored a lot of points, and they had Hall of Fame receivers like Bobby Mitchell and Charlie Taylor, and Sonny is in the Hall of Fame. They would lose games like 35-31, They just didn't have a good defensive team, but they were exciting. And then you think later on, of course, John Riggins and the Hogs, and you think of Joe Theismann. And Joe Theismann literally died on the field. That's too strong a term. He left his career on the field. The broken leg that he suffered in 1985 on Monday Night Football for the entire country to see as Lawrence Taylor jumped on the pile, and technology that was new to ABC at the time, the reverse camera angle where they went to break with Theismann on the field, knowing that this was going to be a season-ending injury, but not how serious it was. And they came back with reverse camera angle with Frank Gifford having to warn the nation, you might want to hide your eyes like this. And you saw Joe Theismann's leg break like a pencil. That's what we saw back in 1985. Wow, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of that November of 85. This was Theismann on Channel 5 last night with reaction about the news that the deal has been made to put the team back in D.C.
It was going to somebody else's house. You were going to visit somebody else's house. But your house was still standing and your house was still there. And I know it needed a lot of work. And of course, got to remember, Josh is a Maryland guy. He grew up with this football team in this stadium. So I think it isn't just something for us as players or for the fans of this football franchise, but ownership has a very, very sentimental attachment to this as well. And so we talk about full cycles. This is one for him as well.
When we look at the last year, especially, I know I was at the first game as a fan when Josh Harris, it was his first game as owner, and you could feel the excitement, you could feel the optimism, because I know Washington fans for years, in spite of all the ups and downs, so many of them stuck with this team. Now that we're on the precipice of something new here, there is still a big job that Josh Harris and company have to do in selling this to people who may not believe this is the way to go, that this is the best use. So do you have a message to people who might be on the fence about that?
Trust and believe in him. 2 years ago, he bought the football team. Then we were able to put something together very special this past year. I think this is going to be another indication of what ownership will do going forward to make this franchise even more exciting than it's been, even more close to home. And as I said in the video, let's bring Washington's football back to Washington, D.C. That's what we're called. We're not called the Virginia whatevers. We're not called the Maryland whatevers. We're Washington. We're the Washington Commanders. And I think that you just have to continue to believe, because the steps that the ownership is taking going forward have been monumental in changing the face of this franchise. And not only uniting those, you got to remember, Jim, it's been decades since a lot of these people have ever seen anybody win. And so all of a sudden now the winning is back, and I believe it will continue. And then now we have possibly a new home coming up, which everybody's going to be very excited and interesting to see. But it does, it's where we were. I remember the stands shaking, just standing on that field in the NFC Championship game against the Cowboys, and the ground beneath my feet shook. As I talk to you now, I get goosebumps about that moment because it was so special. And hopefully there'll be a lot more special moments like that going forward.
Yeah, the little selling there by Theismann, very important. And he talks about the commitment. Yes, the team is putting up $2.7 billion. Now, I had heard this a while back, read it, whatever, that the league has a program to give loans to owners who are looking to build. Do you know what the cap on that is? It's $300 million. That's it. He's putting up $2.7 billion plus cost overruns. It could wind up being essentially a tenth of what he's putting up. $300 million used to build you a stadium, used to buy you a franchise and more. Doesn't buy Bupkis now. So that's a big financial commitment on his part. Now, there's pushback on it, sure. I mean, there are people who say $100 billion of taxpayer money for a stadium. You kidding me? But, if they don't build it there, what are they doing with the land? Yeah, you can build some low-cost housing, but it's 180 acres. There's a lot you can do with this. There's also going to be a sports complex, an indoor complex that's going to be built next door. I would imagine that's possibly where the Mystics might move. I wonder if you could play some indoor soccer games there, things like that. There's a lot of things that can happen with this. And as far as where the financing is going to come, this is above my pay grade. But let me just read you this paragraph from the Post. Officials said the city would finance a portion of the deal by extending the ballpark fee, a tax on businesses earning more than $5 million. The fee was expected to expire in 2026 after the city paid off the construction bonds for Nationals Park, officials said. Instead, the city plans to rebrand the fee as Sports Facilities Fee and ask businesses to keep paying, a move that could cause consternation in the business community, given they were expecting that fee to end. So there's going to be a little pushback on that, too. Whoa, I thought this was supposed to end in 2026. Now, this is kind of the cost of doing business, but, some of those businesses will benefit from 200 events being played at this stadium a year. That's going to help them as well. So there's things that we look at down the line. And like I say, when the Nationals, the Expos were owned by Major League Baseball, and the move to Washington was contingent on a stadium being approved, the whole stadium, the whole Megillah, was going to cost about $600 million. And there was major outrage about that. What do you mean, $600 million taxpayer money? Now you're only talking about a portion of the stadium, a relatively small portion of the stadium, and that's going to be $1 billion. And it's going to be capped at $1 billion. I sound like I'm selling, but I am. I mean, I think like most of us who are sports fans would like to see it back in town. All right. That's enough on the stadium for today. I'm sure we'll have some more follow-up on it tomorrow. I want to thank Jeff Idelson and Gene Fruth for coming on to talk about the documentary See Her, Be Her. Thanks to Isaac and Harris for running the show. All of you who listen. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.